Spectrovision Radio.
And I felt a little cold hand hold my hand and lead me into the cave, further and further and further. I think actually past where the cave actually finishes, and there were probably about 20 or 30 of these creatures, people in there.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Hi folks, so this episode is a very deep insight into what our relationship can be with these worlds. The crazier the outside world gets, the more it makes sense to turn to the natural world, to what really matters in the world. And I think that we can see where we've gone wrong in the world. There are lots of things that we need to do, counteract the mistakes that we've made, to heal the divisions between us all. And what I think this story brings is hope that we can trust that we will know what we need to do. I really feel like we can learn a lot from our guest in this episode. It reminds us to take care of our sacred places in the land, and they may not be the ones that are listed as ancient sites, and they may not be the ones that we've been told are those that are most important to our cultures. They might be simply parts of the landscape that mean a lot to us, and I think we can trust that. So do listen inwardly, and I hope that you can appreciate this open-hearted share as much as I do. If these worlds are of interest to you and you benefit from having a community that is able to compare notes with each other, then please do come and support on Patreon. For the members group, which is £5.55 a month, so that's kind of the price of perhaps buying me a coffee if you're enjoying the shows every month, that will bring you into our community, our main community, where we have a Discord. You can get to know each other. You also get an RSS feed, no adverts for each episode, plus I release early releases there and the full length version. So if you are enjoying the show, I do urge you, please come and support, because it helps to ensure that the project keeps running. Other ways you can help are to like and subscribe, to also leave a nice review so that other people can find the show, and please do share with other people that you think might enjoy it. I do appreciate you watching. Once again, a huge thanks to our guest for sharing what is really a truly amazing story. I'm always very keen to hear your stories. I've just completed my book, so I'm now catching up with everything else, and you can write to me at modernfairysightings@gmail.com or scarletofthefae@gmail.com, Scarlet with 2 T's and FAE. If you're interested, you can pre-order my book, Modern Fairy Sightings, Personal Encounters in Extraordinary Times. That's going to be released in mid-November. Enjoy the episode. Hello everybody and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast. I'm Jo Hickey Hall, and this time I'm joined by Cobweb. I'm particularly interested in your story.
It's a story that sort of starts in 2008 on Midsummer Night's Eve. But all my life, it wasn't particularly unusual for me. I've always seen things. I spent most of my sort of teenage years trying very hard not to. when I met my wife, she was really open and encouraging in that kind of thing. So I started to open up a bit. I mean, I had learned that you don't mention that you see things because, that people don't look kindly on it. But once I was in an environment where I could, I'd got the skill of shutting it out, of not seeing things. And then I added to that the skill of being able to use it when I wanted to. So it's not entirely unusual for me, but if you were, say, out in the countryside and you see a little deer in the field, that would be normal. If it comes up to you and starts asking questions, that's when it gets a bit odd. So seeing things and interacting with them, not necessarily, the same thing. So back in 2008, we'd just moved to the area, and I decided I wanted to go out on the morning of Midsummer Night's Eve, and I'll go. We found a place on the map that was called Barwood. I thought, oh, that sounds amazing. I'll go there. So I went out on my own just before dawn. It's only about 4 or 5 miles away. I left the car quite a long way away, and I walked through the woods, through the fields to get to the woods. It was really, really, really peaceful, and there was little deers and rabbits and stuff. And the peace was broken quite dramatically when I nearly stood on a pheasant, which leapt into the air, making an enormous amount of noise.
Oh, that's so silly.
But one thing I saw, the edge of the woods with its back to me, in a sort of darkened bit behind some trees, was the weirdest little creature. Well, not particularly little, probably about 5, 6. Its head was kind of pointy, but it didn't seem to be a hat. I was seeing it from behind, and there was a kind of weird green glow about it, and then it was gone. And I came home to my wife and I said, I see this thing. And she said, what did it look like? And the best way I could get to do that was to just paint it. I had a photograph of the place where it wasn't. And so I painted it in. And that was kind of the start of me using art to explain things I've seen. So it wasn't too unusual for me, because I've seen things before, for the rest of my life. I forgot all about it completely. Then that was 2008. In 2012, a friend of ours had mentioned that there was a fairy cave near where we lived. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. We'll go for a day out. We'll have a look around. You kind of drop your car off at the edge of a housing estate, and you have to go across many fields and down. It's a wooded valley with a stream down the middle of it, with the hilarious name of Shittlehope Burn.
Brilliant.
And at the end of that, if you carry on through the woods, it's quite a steep path in places, but it's walkable. There's halfway there's a circle of trees. I don't know how. I'm assuming it's naturally occurring, but it was an exact circle of trees in the middle of other trees, kind of thing. If you stand in the middle of there's a really strange feeling. It felt like this is the boundary of where you're going, and I wasn't really expecting very much. It's like a folklore-y thing, and I thought, yeah. But we stopped there, and I kind of asked permission, and felt that it was okay to carry on going. So we went up to where the caves are, but you're looking down on them. Because you're on the side of the valley. Well, there was a big old tree that you could sort of climb down the tree. It was a fallen over tree, and you can climb down it and get to river level and go into the caves. So we went in there. I had a bit of an explore. It was a lot harder to get out again, but nothing particularly exciting. It felt there was a kind of tingle to it, but there was nothing there. I couldn't see anything. Took a photograph in the cave. We got back, and there was clearly a fairy on it in a Cottingley style, but it was obviously a fly or something. But it was like a little winged figure just floating in the air. I never even noticed it at the time, but I think it was a fly. And that was our first encounter with Little Hope Burton. And we went home again, and that was it, really. In 2019, I was doing an exhibition of artwork based on the folklore and landscape of the North Pennines. So in 2 years before that, I've been preparing it. I did a lot of time reading about places, and I did a lot of time visiting places, and then I spent a year painting. One of the places we were going to go was a place I found about it read about it in books, called Heatheryburn Cave, where they'd found a Bronze Age hoard. I thought this is going to be amazing. We'll go there. Um, and I had sort of in my head, because I had all the local fairy stories. The Shittle Burn has its own fairy stories. The actual caves are called Linkirk, which is to do with like a pool church. There's a river running straight through it, so it's very watery, and that comes in other places later on. I looked it up in all the books, and I thought they've got stuff from it. There's a little tiny museum in Weardale that's got a couple of bits and pieces. The rest in the British Museum, somewhere hidden away. I really wanted to look at that. I had in my back of my head all the folklore, fairy folklore from Weardale, which is quite a lot actually. And I thought, well, maybe these fairy things are to do with ancient British people who'd survived the Anglo-Saxon invasion and hidden in caves, because there was historical things, there were evidence for that they were there. Not that late probably, but so I had in my head this kind of thing like, oh yeah, they're not fairies, they're memories of ancestors or something like that, which doesn't tie in whatsoever with the glowy green people that I saw. So we'll go there. We set out. It was Midsummer Night's Eve again. I thought that'd be a really good place to go, and I get some inspiration to do fairy paintings. And then started looking for it on maps, and it's not there. So I Googled it a lot and found out that it was there until the Victorians demolished it by dynamiting the whole place.
Oh.
So there was nowhere to go. So we'll go up to Shittlehope again. It was going towards dusk by this point, so it was quite late on in the evening. It was pretty much as it was before. I went down to the cave, had a quick look around, came back up again, and then the atmosphere just changed absolutely, completely within just a click. And felt we are not supposed to be headed back towards the car. And as we were going down, I could see 4 figures on the other side of the bank coming towards us, and they were definitely not human. It actually quite shook me up at the wrongness. They were people shaped, but they were clearly not people. They didn't move like people. And I knew at first, I don't think they were aware of us, but as soon as they were, they did not want us there.
And how did they move? What did they look like?
Tall, probably tall, but around about 6 foot, like a tall, normal person. But they didn't have too many joints in their arms and legs, but it looked like they did the way they moved. Their shoulders and hips were really unusually wide, and they were very thin. And they had a sort of green glow about them. And they moved. At the time I said it's something like spider snakes. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but it's kind of sinewy, but also skittery. And it just looked wrong, and it was actually quite disturbing. I used a little bit of that in my paintings. I based the paintings on the actual story of the Shittlehope Fairies, which I'll tell you in a second. It's quite cool. And I put a bit of that in, but I didn't want to put too much in, because A, people don't want that on their walls, and B, I don't think it was polite. So I went halfway between the whole Bronze Age survivors and what I actually saw.
Yeah.
The Shittlehope Fairy story is there was a farm, and a farmer's daughter had gone into the caves. And we walked past the farm as you're going to go there. It's still there.
Right.
All these places that are like actual places. He was really worried that his daughter was going to get taken by the fairies because she'd seen them. So he went to the wise woman of the village, and she said, if you make sure that when the fairies come, it's going to be midnight, the farm has to be in complete darkness with no sounds, and then they'll just go away again. So the fairies turned up, and they put out all the fires and the lights. They'd even put like wrapping on the animals' hooves so they wouldn't make a noise. And then the dwarf had a little dog, and it barked just at the wrong moment, and so she got taken away. So he went back the next morning to the wise woman, and she said, you need to go to the king of the fairies and give him 3 gifts. You need to give him a limb that has been removed without shedding blood, a chicken with no bones, and a light without fire. And there were a couple of versions of the story. I looked this up the afternoon after we'd been there, so I didn't know it when we first went the first time, but it made it a lot more interesting. The one version is that the farmer then helps various people, and they give him the answers to the riddles. And one is where he just observes them in real life. The first one is the tale of a lizard. And the second one is an egg, but it has to be of a certain age, it had to be fertilized, but not have a chicken in it yet. Mm-hmm. And the last one was a firefly. So he gathered those, took them to the fairy king, got his daughter back. And that's how that worked. Mm-hmm. But there are quite a few stories in Weardale of various things like that. There's one where a child throws stones into a cooking pot the fairies are using, and they get scolded, so he can't walk.
Okay, right.
He apologizes, and they make him better though. So, and there are various versions. I've got a book with the version where he sees a kestrel dropping the lizard's tail, and he actually observes the fireflies, and he has an egg on his farm. But there's another one I found on the internet where he helps people, and they give him the answers. But there are a few versions of it going around.
These are fairies that you must be aware of, and I think the version that I read was she'd gone down into the valley and kind of heard the music and the laughter and the dancing, and was kind of compelled to go in to the and couldn't, because she couldn't quite make it through the crack, and came home, and then they come after her. So these are, you go into the wilderness and you must beware, and if you don't have your wits about you, they might come and seek you out.
Yeah.
Especially children, always. So, yeah.
It's a useful warning, don't go and play in the caves because you might not come out,
Exactly.
But, I think there's definitely something to it, rather than it just being entirely made up as a warning story.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, when you saw, did you say that you were alone when you saw those?
My wife was with me. She didn't see anything, but she felt the change in the atmosphere, and she said, we're going to go,
Yes. Yeah. How was that for you? It felt wrong.
I felt like we were kind of trespassing or intruding on something that wasn't for us. So it was uncomfortable. It was like, no, we should not be here. We're not supposed to see this. It's not, we've not been invited.
And did you, how was it when you got home? Did the feeling immediately leave when you left, or what was it like for the coming days? I'm interested in your dreams as well, if you had any strange dreams.
Strange dreams is kind of standard, really, to be honest. But it stayed with me. It stayed with me a lot, and especially I was doing, I did 3 quite big paintings based on it, and so the memories of it were coming backwards and forwards all the time and resurfacing, and it did stay with me. It's telling that it was a few years before I went back. Yeah. I was very unnerved.
And what made you go back?
We're visited by Paolo.
Okay, well, he always likes to get stuck into things.
He does. While I was doing the research and the visits for the paintings that I was going to do, I discovered there was a altar to Silvanus, the Roman god, behind a bus stop in a little village in the valley.
Oh.
So we went to have a look at that, and there is. It's not where it should be. They moved it to behind a bus stop. It should be a little bit further around the corner, up a hill and across by a pond, as well as a little waterfall and a pool. It's not a big pool, but it's reasonable size. That's where it was. So we went there to have a look, and there was a moment where I felt a sense of recognition, where I got what it was. There were various Sylvanus altars in the region. What those people were encountering.
Sorry, was this at the bus stop or the pond?
This is at the pond.
At the pond,
where it had been. It's very strange to see a thing like that behind a bus stop.
Yeah, what a shame.
There's a lamppost and a bus stop, and then just round the, hidden away. You have to really look for it.
And they moved it in Victorian times, or when did they?
How recently it was moved? It probably is 1900s. So late 1800s. There's various accounts of where it had been, and one of them, it looked as though it was in the churchyard, but it couldn't have been there. It was over the other side where the pond was. Yeah. There's a church on one side, and then a bit further down the road, there's the little waterfall. It's lovely, actually, but it's a really interesting place. And I kind of recognised that, and I thought, this is what they've seen, and they've translated that as, this is that God that they knew.
Yeah.
But it also felt that I'd been recognised. And it kind of completely unlocked Weardale for me. And from that moment on, it was Weardale, Supernatural Weardale and Weardale were the same place. There wasn't so much occasionally glimpsing things by accident. It was there, and it was welcoming. So that was a couple of years later, and we went back with Paolo in 2021, and I felt by then, I'd not been back to Shittlehope, that it would be okay, and I'll show he loves fairies. So I'll show him the fairy caves and see what he gets from it. And it was another incident where it was fine at first, and then afterwards we were told to go away. We went up to the circle of trees and we asked permission, and we were given permission. I asked for permission if we could go into the cave. Paolo couldn't get down, so it was just me. The agreement was that I left my bag behind, so I didn't have any technology or metal or And I went down into the cave, and there were two of them looking considerably more human. There was still the greenness about them, and their eyes were completely black, not massive pupils, but just completely black, but more human looking, with clothes, with kind of a cloaky thing with a pointy hood. And there was two of those there, and the upshot of it was that they would like me to do them a favour, that we shared certain interests, and they were going to say that they would treat us as not enemies because of this. And again, that shook me up quite a lot. Not so much seeing them, but it's different from seeing a rabbit and having a rabbit come and say, "Come for tea with me," It was little. That's the first time I've actually really spoken to things. I've had impressions of sort of emotions and stuff like that, but not actual words. And they weren't speaking, but you could hear them.
Yeah.
You knew exactly what they were saying. The cave changed shape as well. The bit they were standing in wasn't actually there, but the cave was bigger to accommodate them.
Oh yeah, I've experienced something like that before. I know exactly what we're talking about. It can't make sense in our material realm, and yet there it is.
It is, yeah. And then we did that. I came back up, and then it was like, no, time to go now. So we went. Can I read you Paolo's account?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
It says, walking through the woods to get to the cave felt very strange and otherworldly. I didn't find it unpleasant at all, and I don't really shy from the spooky stuff, so usually manage to stay fairly calm. But I do remember noticing to myself to be careful here and to watch my language in terms of what I said to them. Katie, that's my wife, had said several times, "We're not going to make any deals," which we had. Well, I had, but I didn't know about that conversation. That was her and Paolo up on the top of the. So yeah, he didn't have his best shoes on, and he didn't think he'd be able to venture down to the cave. So he stayed on the top with Katie, and I went down. In retrospect, he said, he would have risked anything to have a look, especially since later news suggests that the cave is a lot more inaccessible now, which it is. The woods there's definitely a feeling of being watched and being there as a guest. It wasn't unpleasant, but you knew you had to mind your manners. And that is very much the feeling that those woods give to pretty much everybody I've been with, where you are in somebody else's house kind of thing.
You're the guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of, watch your manners, if people are watching and they haven't been to places like this and they want to know what you mean by that, how do you kind of honour and mind manners in these places?
It's more of an attitude of respect. Also, if there's a bit of litter, you pick it up, and you're not going to leave any of your own, but you'll take away somebody else's. Not just barging ahead, kind of being mindful of your surroundings and the wildlife and the plants and the place itself.
Yeah, so meeting with kind of honour and integrity.
Yeah.
And so are you able to talk about what it was that you agreed to do?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the main part of this, really. We didn't do it there and then. It wasn't a there and then thing. It wasn't until 2024 I went down with my friends Laura and Andy. We revisited the caves. I climbed down, and this time there was the lady one. I'd seen four, so I'd seen I think three blokes and a woman first time, and then I've seen the two blokes on their own, and then this time it was the woman. She was doing the whole "I'm a human being" kind of act, not very convincingly, and the gist of the conversation was that they were stuck. They needed to be out of there and to move, and they couldn't get out
of the cave.
Yeah, and they were starving because of it. It was moving. She tried to tell me what we needed to do, and I get the feeling it's like when you try to explain something to a cat, because I could not get it. And she put in my head all of these images, a castle it is, from lots of different angles at once, in a sort of Picasso style, which was, and I tried to get her to slow down and to explain it because I couldn't work out what it actually was looking at because there was too much of it, and her answer to that was to more.
Yeah.
So I had a head full of images of a place, and then the other things were World War II aeroplanes going overhead, and then a tree with a human eye in it, a green eye in it, and those were the three things that were supposed to be. This is how you fix it. That's it.
Yeah.
So we came home and we had a long talk with Katie about it. She's very good. I see things and then I go, I have no idea what that is or what that means, and she translates them into reality.
Brilliant.
So we worked out it was Pendragon Castle. I went on the internet and checked lots of images of it, especially there's lovely images from above, which helped because I'd seen it from above.
Yeah.
I had been there once many years earlier. It's if you go from our house to my parents via a circuitous route, then you go past it. And we always thought, oh, Pendragon Castle, that looked interesting. And once we got out and had a look, and it was a bit boring, really. It was, it was modernish.
Right.
It was originally built in the 12th century, so it's got nothing to do with King Arthur, allegedly. And then it was rebuilt a lot later on, and now it's in ruins. And I didn't really think a lot of it, but it was clearly the place. And I had a link from that and World War II, and also this tree with the eye. The tree with the eye was the biggest problem, that wasn't revealed until right at the very last second.
That makes sense because the I comes in at the end for
Mhm.
me
Yeah.
personally in experience.
The World War II reference we had, so gave us a date, and we think, well, something obviously happened here then that's caused this problem now. That's not what it was actually, but so we went to Penrith for the droving. I think it's October, I think, usually.
Can you explain what the droving is?
The droving, it's yearly, except when last year there was a big storm, so we couldn't have it. It's like a festival of lights. Everybody has big floats with animals that are glow, and people wear masks, and there's lots of lights, and
Yeah.
it's great music and stuff. There's processions through the streets, and there's loads of stalls and entertainers and stuff like that.
Right.
It's well worth going to.
Thank you.
Actually, we should
And
be
it's held in
Penrith, usually October. I don't forgot the date. It was 27th of October that year, 2024. The shops were open late because of the droving. There was a bookshop, stroke off license, which is a great combination. I think there should be a lot more of those.
Yeah.
And I was having a look in there. I had a look to see if there was any books on local folklore, because this is in the Eden Valley where Pendragon Castle is. But I wasn't overly thinking about fairies at the time. I was just trying to work out what's the connection between Shittlehope Burn, World War II, and the Eden Valley and Pendragon Castle in particular. And in this bookshop, I found a book. I thought, oh, that looks really cool. It's called Arthur, Bear of the Britons. And I opened it up, and there was a little map in it, and it was in the folklore section. And then I flipped through it, and I thought, oh, it's just a novel, and put it back. And we went home, and a couple of days later, I've been scouring the internet for any kind of reference to World War II and Eden Valley and Pendragon Castle. And it turns out that the bloke who bought the castle in the 60s, his father had written a book during World War II about King Arthur and Pendragon Castle. And it was the one I'd had in my hand.
Oh my goodness. Love that.
So that was I think we're on the right track here.
Mm.
And I still didn't really understand it until long after actually the events. But we gathered together a little group of people who'd been to Shittlehope Burn, and we started doing a mixture of esoteric and practical research. So we'd have a lot of things where we'd all go away and we'd meditate on whatever particular thing it was, and we do use divination and inspiration and read any history books we could find, and all that kind of thing. So we knew it was Pendragon Castle. We knew there was a link there to World War II. The bloke and the whole family, they ended up buying it, the castle, and they were obsessed with the Arthurian side of it. The only actual evidence is one Roman coin, which was found there, because it'd been rebuilt loads of times. There was a woman whose name I can't remember, but I think she will become significant in the future, who had rebuilt lots of the castles in the area. She was Elizabethan, and I think she was up to something. It wasn't just a case of rebuilding castles.
Right.
But that's something that I need to look more into. I've got a book about it which I haven't read yet. So there were becoming more and more links to it, and the Arthurian side of it ties in with my main quest. See what I mean? Because that has been there's been a lot of Arthurian stuff in that. In the book, I actually ended up buying a paperback version of the book that the bloke wrote, and there's a character in that called Modron, who I'm very familiar with. I met her in a tomb in North Wales at one point, but she is a lady, obviously. Her name means mother, and in the book she was a soldier and a man. I thought, how have you got this? And what he'd done is the author had taken a line from the Black Book of Carmarthen and only taken half of the sentence where it says Mabon, son of Modron, and he just got Modron.
Right.
So we use that as a character. But the place itself, if there is any Arthurian Dark Ages connection to the place, it was to Urien of Reged, who was the father of two of Modron's children.
Oh,
Comically. Yeah, it's an interesting family. One of them went on to become Saint Mungo. There's two that appear in Arthurian legends. I think Olwyn and his brother. Anyway, it's, in Cumbria, there's a whole load of legends about a king called Eveling, and his daughter is Modron. There's also the link to Anglesey in North Wales, and also to Glastonbury, where she turns up as Morgan Le Fay.
oh, goodness. Wow.
It's an interesting family, and they got about a bit, and they've got, it's like gods and fairies and human kings and saints all in the same family. It's fascinating stuff. So that kind of suggested that I was on the right tracks again, even though he was wrong about it.
Mm.
The main offshoot of about a year of Zoom calls and research and all the things that we did, we chatted very, very regularly, was there had been an agreement broken. Are you aware of Julia Jeffrey?
The name rings a bell, and I don't think I can recall their works. I'm not sure.
She does a lot of stuff on Scottish folklore. She's done a couple of tarot decks, and one of them is Scottish witchcraft one, which is really, it's just, the paintings are amazing. But we used that quite a lot, and we were getting what is the problem here, and we were getting it from both sides, the exact opposite. One side was the agreement between the king of the humans kind of thing and the fairy queen had been broken, and depending on who was doing it, the the problem was either the fairy queen or the human king. So breakdown in communication there, and that was a very much the clue to unlocking it all. There had been an agreement and it had been broken. One of the major things that we got coming through was we had to renew the vow. So we were trying to free the fairies in Shittlehope who were stuck there and renew this vow. Had some information, but not a lot. Paolo had a magic sword, which he picked up, which also tied in really well to the Arthurian stuff. And it was like the opposite of Excalibur, in that it came from a man who was given to a woman.
Right. Yeah.
So we'd gathered together some ingredients. I went on a recce to Pendragon Castle with my wife a couple of months before we were going to go and do whatever it was we were going to go and do, which we didn't know really yet. And she had a lot of other things that were connected with horses, which were part of the sort of the main plot. But a herd of horses, sacred horses, that were connected with Albion. So she was picking up on them there. I heard very clearly a voice saying, "Gather up the bones," while we were at the castle looking around. And I thought, well, what does this mean? I had a look around the castle. I'd had a look around before I'd seen that. I heard the voice, and there were no bones. So it's like, well, is this some kind of abstract thing? And then I went back to the places I'd already been, and there were bones placed there, little animal bones, a tooth from either a horse or a cow, some random things like that. And they'd obviously been placed there halfway up a wall, on a little nook, and they weren't. So I just did what I gathered them up, took them home with me, and they came in useful later on. But I still don't. At the time, that didn't seem to fit in with anything. Well, I had a handful of bones. I collect bones when I'm out. If I see a bone, I'll pick it up and bring it, or an interesting stone or whatever. And I like to have in around me when I'm in my working space things that have a spirit of a place that I need to be able to access. If you see what I mean?
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. Yeah.
so that had an awful lot of there's a lot of rabbit bones around the cave entrance at Shittlehope. Always. It's one of the reasons when I did the paintings, I had them all dressed in rabbit skin clothes because
Okay.
I thought, yeah, I'd obviously making use of the rabbits. So I had a handful of bones from Pendragon Castle. I also have a handful of bones, well, quite a big pile of bones actually, from Shittlehope, which I collected over the years. I put them in a little bowl and just forgot about them for a while. So that was our recce of the place. No fairies, nothing like, well, unless that was what the voice. But it was a voice without a presence. It came from everywhere, you know.
Yeah.
And we went back eventually. We'd picked a date where we could all go because two of my friends coming down from Scotland. Paolo's down in the wilds of the southeast, um, and it's a long journey for all of us. We were kind of in the middle. It was about an hour and a half for us. We picked a day when we could. We met up in Kirby Stephen, which is a lovely place. They've got a church there which has a Loki stone in it. It's debatable whether it's Loki or not, but it has. It's supposed to be Loki. I think it's the wrong way up. I think it should be upside down. It's a stone. It's about 3 foot by a foot and a half, with a carving in it in a sort of Scandinavian style of
Yeah.
a horned figure, and lots of interwoven, Celtic wigglers. So we went to see that first, and then we had lunch. We had a look at the church, and then we went up to see the actual castle itself, and it's chucked it down. Absolutely chucked it down. It was really, really grim, cold and wet and miserable, even though it was the middle of summer. So we had a pondle around on our own and together. I wanted to get the feel of the place because we still didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I've made 3 wooden discs, which I gold leafed just to make them pretty, with a symbol on. There's like one symbol on each, and it puts together to make it the symbol. It says there's a circle in the middle. This is what they ended up as. So this is a circle here, and then these 2 are the gates. And if they're this way around, they're open, and if they swap sides, then it's closed.
Yeah.
I got that from a strange experience in the Pyrenees.
Right.
I was given that from, and I thought, oh, we'll use that. We'll use that as an opening closing thing because we're trying to open a gate basically so people can get out, so that the Shittlehope fairies can get whatever it is they need to be. So that seemed like a good idea. I took those with us. We had some water from the Wells of Weary, near Arthur's Seat. I'm assuming you know about those.
Beautiful.
They're very much linked with Arthurian stuff and Scottish witchcraft. So Laura brought a little bottle of that. I had a bottle of some Welsh holy water that we'd got, but we didn't use that at all. Lots of things we thought we don't know what we're going to be doing, so let's just fill the bag with stuff that might be useful, and we'll work it out as we go along.
Mm.
So we were walking around. I got separated from most of the rest of the people. They were doing a thing with Katie, the thing with the horses. I'd had a dream actually. I'd had a dream between these 2 events of horses getting up from underneath the ground, like buried horses.
Yeah.
And they were the same horses that Katie had been associating with Albion. She was seeing those. I don't know whether she was physically seeing those, or she knew they were there on that day. I was trying to work out what on earth we were doing. Paolo showed me his magic sword, which is amazing. If you touch it, it's like you see paintings of galaxies and stuff, and just like blackness with lights, and that's if you hold that, that's what you see.
Goodness. Oh,
Uh,
wow.
he thinks it's something to do with igniting stars, and it is linked to it's only a Victorian copy, but the Elizabethan version was something to do with supernova in Elizabethan times and John Dee and
Yeah.
lots of weirdness.
Wow. Interesting links.
So I was walking around the area trying to work out what where we need to be, what we're going to do. We still had this eye floating, that's a, we don't know what it is.
Mm.
There was a hawthorn tree growing out at the foot of the castle bank. There was a hawthorn tree, sort of to one side. There was an old ruined barn, and it was kind of growing through the wall and at a weird angle. So I went down to have a look at that because solitary hawthorn trees. Maybe that was a thing. On the big trunky bit of it, it was covered in green moss, and in the middle there's a complete bald patch, eye shaped, like somebody had drawn an eye onto it in the moss. I thought, oh, okay. I went to fetch everybody. We came down there, still trying to work out this horse thing, and the wooden circles I got, the circle with the circle fit exactly in as an iris on the eye shape.
Yeah.
We put both sides of the gate so it was open next to it, and then it was like, what do we do with the sword? This is where I sort of stepped out. Really, we did pendulum, and it turned out that all the ladies that were with us had to hold the sword, and they renewed the vow basically that we would work with these people.
Really beautiful.
Yeah, I was at the time trying to hold on to where I was physically, drifting between Shittlehope and Pendragon, and I wasn't very aware of what was going on, but it did the job. The atmosphere changed completely, and it was you knew something had happened. It kind of stopped raining a bit as well, which was nice. But I think Paolo said there's a bit of an anticlimax at the end because he wasn't involved right at the centre of it, and neither was I, because the blokes were not involved in the actual thing. It was a lady thing. They used the water from the wells of Weary as well, and yeah, whatever it was that we did was what they wanted us to do, and it worked.
And the women that took part in the sword part of the ritual, what was their experience like?
I think they very much thought that was. We talked to Laura quite a lot about it. I think that was their job. That was they needed to do that. We just stepped back. They did what needed to be done. Laura came up with so much of the most important information, and a lot of the stuff that's going to be. She actually saw the tree long before we went there and saw the tree. She had it in a vision, which was interesting.
Amazing.
I wasn't even looking for it. I hadn't thought back to that. And it's like, oh my God, there is an eye on this tree. Come look at the tree with the eye on it.
Yeah. And Laura is an artist, isn't she?
Yes, she is, yeah.
Really enjoy her art, and it is very tuned into nature and the other world.
Yeah, she does both of them very well. She does, there's supernatural stuff that's good. I've got, looking at me now, pictures she did of Shellycoat, which is a Scottish sort of goblin-y kind of thing. Who is more playful than drowning people in the river kind of thing, but that kind of thing. But sort of a lighter Ginny Green Teeth, and wears a coat made of shells. I still had a lot of questions about. I know there were fairy stories from the Eden Valley, and there's a thing called the Luck of Edenhall, which was a glass that had been left behind by fairies, drinking glass, which turns out to be from the Middle East. It's in the V&A now. So I've been in between all of these things. We've been up to Dunvegan and seen the Fairy Cup there and the Fairy Flag. And the Fairy Flag certainly is also from the Middle East. And I had in my head this whole sort of Jinn fairy connection. Because I think these kind of fairies, I don't think they're nature spirits particularly. I think they're like people.
Yeah.
I mean, I have seen things that I would call nature spirits. Like this is a tree and this is this bit of lake or whatever. Yeah, personified. But they're more like us.
Yeah. Do you think it's even sort of pre-Bronze Age where the hall was? Do you think it's something further back? And do you think
Yeah,
that, yeah,
yeah, definitely. That was the latest bit of it that they'd found. I think this goes back way, way, way back.
yeah, I would say so too. And when you said that they were starved, do you
Mm.
know what it was that they were hungering for?
I don't think it was particularly food. I
No.
think cut off from some kind of source of energy or power or whatever it was.
Right.
But there was an interim, I missed out a bit, where we went back to Hope Burn just before we went up to the castle. And this is possibly the most terrifying bit for me. We went down into the cave. I'd left all my stuff behind. It would have been very, very dry. And I'd never been able to walk particularly far into the cave because there's a river coming through it and it's up to your knees if you're not careful. But it wasn't. It was kind of not even ankle height. And it was pitch black because I'd gone further in away from the entrance. You couldn't see anything. I thought, oh, it's okay. I've got my phone with me. I can put the torch on. Oh, I haven't got my phone with me. And I felt a little cold hand hold my hand and lead me into the cave further and further and further. I think actually past where the cave actually finishes. And there were probably about 20 or 30 of these creatures, people in there. Uh, it was really, really miserable.
Yeah, yeah, wow. Yeah, that must have been awful. So
Mm.
really, you're obviously really sensitive to what their experience was, these people. I don't know about the sense of reconnection. Do you think it's something? I mean, I'm thinking about this, I believe this kind of new age we're going into, which is a move maybe from the patriarchal back to Aquarius to feminine
Mhm.
energy. And do you think that it was tied up somehow with that? What do you make of
I
that?
think it's very much a rebalancing between male and female and human and the people who live alongside human, and the land and with both sides of that. I think that's a thing that there are so many broken agreements.
Yeah, absolutely right. And
Mm.
even stretching back, you know, this is something I've kind of talked about in my book as well, the shift that happened with human beings.
Mm. So most of the fairy stories in both in the Eden Valley and in Weardale sort of end Georgian times. I mean, they are still there, but that's when it stopped being part of everyday life. The link to Pendragon Castle I didn't get until quite a long time afterwards. I'd been looking at the Luck of Edenhall. I've been looking at fairy stories from the area, and it turns out there are a couple. One of where somebody disturbs the fairies. I think it's in the late 1800s when they're having a massive party, and they disappear up a ladder into the sky and don't come back. And that was close by to the castle, but not very close by. And then I discovered another thing in a book where there's a pothole uh, filled with water where there were a lot of fairy sightings, and the fairies used to help the farmers.
Yeah.
And they're always described as having like green dresses on.
Mhm.
And that turns out you can actually see it from Pendragon Castle.
Right. Yeah.
So the link that I couldn't find was actually there all along. There is a link between the two sets of fairies.
Mm.
I think the Weardale Fairies are a lot less human friendly,
Okay.
probably for reasons.
Understandably,
Mm.
sound of it. And having been that far into the cave and not been there before and not having a light, I'm thinking you could have fallen down something. So you got a lot of you placed a lot of trust in where you're being led. What was it like to leave? And what else did you glean in that moment with them?
It was very strange. There is something holding my hand. I can't see what it is particularly. I've gone back into a place that it is uneven, but I was okay. I wouldn't have wanted to do it on my own without a guide. And then there's all these eyes, like cat's eyes kind of thing, but
Yeah.
looking back at you,
Mm,
a feeling of absolute.
yeah. Not many people could do that.
Yeah, gave me the willies.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that sort of made it so I had to do whatever it was we were going to do when we went to Pendragon. It had to be done. Um, the shift in atmosphere after the thing had happened, the ritual was. I had in my head that the back of the cave had kind of gone, opened out into some moorland.
Mm.
Um, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it would open up into the other bit of the valley just behind it, but it wasn't geographically the same place. So that's what it was, a sort of an image in my mind.
It makes me think about the Children of Woolpit, where the Green Children of
Yeah.
Woolpit, where part of the legend, the story that is told around it is that they say that they went into a cave because they were herding their father's sheep. They
Mhm.
went into a cave, but they came out the other side into, this green field where people were harvesting,
Mhm.
basically. So this idea of going deep into a cave, but actually exiting into another realm. So where it doesn't make sense geographically, we can enter into the void, if you like, and then, pass through and come out somewhere else.
Yes. And I found a use for all the bones. Um,
Yeah.
I made them into this thing. So this is bones from both places, and incorporating stuff I found in both places and the discs that we used as a gate. And it's permanently open now. It's got a little ink on the back. It's just a
And
few.
do you still attend to that in any way?
I do. Occasionally, we've dripped some water from the wells of Weary on it. It does things. I've had a crow feather appear next to it, and sometimes it moves around a bit. And I've had one night I woke up and there was like strange lights in the room with it, like bubbles of light, which was a bit odd.
Mm.
But yeah, it's got a presence. You can feel it hum sometimes.
And have you had a sense of response from them?
I think that is the response from them, to be honest. It's I think it's going to come in handy at some point. And
Yeah.
it's just quite humming away in the background, doing its thing. But about a month ago, me and my wife went back to Fiddlehope to sort of see how things had changed there,
Mhm.
and they had changed hugely. Storm David had quite fun with it. We went up the circle of trees, which is always like the gateways. One of those has been knocked down completely across the middle of the circle, like a sort of no entry sign. The path's a lot less accessible, and if you go up to the cave, the tree that you used to climb down to get to the cave is just completely gone. You can't do it anymore. So it's a sort of 10-foot drop sheer. Getting up and down that is not easy. I couldn't have done it. So I sat at the top and sort of said goodbye.
It's amazing. So it was there as long as it needed to be.
Yeah.
You made it down there. Did you get the sense that anyone else was going there?
No. Um, I know people have. I mean, if you go on the internet, they can say that people have gone, "Oh, we've been exploring this exciting cave, and isn't it pretty?" and blah blah blah. But I don't think anybody else had actually been involved with the local inhabitants, so to speak.
Mm.
If they had, then we didn't know about it.
Yeah. So now there's the kind of no entry sign that's made by the tree going across the circle and the means, the entrance.
I mean, it was never overly easy to get down, but I could do it. And I'm in my 50s, and I'm not overly fit, and I can get up and down. I'm
Mm.
not that tall either, but I don't have any sense of fear when it comes to things like that.
So do you think you'll still end up going there to
Yes,
yeah.
I think though that the main story going forwards is over the other side. Um, in Cumbria with the Eden Valley things. I think Shittlehope, I think it's not been abandoned. There was definitely a presence there, and I could feel that we were being watched all the time we were there. But it was not a place that was inhabited full time, if you see what I mean. It's no longer a home, and I don't think it was a home. I think it was a prison. I mean, it had been a home once. So I think there is stuff still to do in the Eden Valley, and there are also links to Scotland and probably a lot of other places as well. There's all these weird connections between places. So I get the impression that there are a load of little gates that go from one place to another that aren't necessarily geographically connected, but they are if you go through them. And there's a whole sort of road system that I don't have access to. That we shouldn't have, probably.
Yeah, well, the fairies would know themselves, as it, that is their abode under hills and through caves and, within the earth. So moving forward, you're focusing on kind of these other projects in the Eden Valley, and
I've not started yet, and we're gathering thoughts at the moment.
yeah. Well, I really appreciate your kind of tenderness towards this place and your care of these beings and what you've been able to achieve with your community as well. You've got a group of you there that are able to work really deeply because you all know and trust each other, and you are able to trust each other's judgments as well and what you're each picking up. Because if you have that in a magic working group, that you can achieve so much when you have a group that you really know and trust, and that you can rely on each other to just explore what's coming up for them, how it feels. And what I also love is that you didn't have to say, oh, well, it's definitely, it's this, we're going to go there, we're going to do this, that, and that, because we don't know, as you rightly have shown in your actions, we're led.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have to kind of trust putting one foot in front of the other, and just to know that you need, you're told what to bring, and that's all. And I think that's kind of a real quality of these experiences, is that you're only ever given what I call, the breadcrumbs of what's just going to happen next. And that's all you know. And you just need to trust, a bit like you did also, walking into the cave and just trusting. And there, you had the hand that brought and showed you. You were able to make yourself vulnerable. And it sounds like they showed you their situation, their vulnerable situation in return in that moment. It's just really beautiful and loving, and just so receptive and understanding to these worlds, that a lot of us can learn from this, the way that you've approached this situation. So I really thank you very much for sharing this.
Thank you for listening to me. Struggle with words sometimes, but I'm much better at painting it.
But perhaps if somebody just sat with the paintings, they would understand in a deeper way too. So I look forward to sharing those, and it's been really lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.
Perhaps you can let us know, what happens next.
Yeah.
I feel like the story, as you say, there's more to come.
There were a lot of loose ends that came out of what we spent a year working out, and they didn't fit into that day, but I think will be part of future things.
Brilliant. Well, I send my wishes with you for whatever comes next. It's beautiful, and it's a story in itself. It's a piece of folklore in itself. Yeah. So it really reminds me of the old tales, where you are just given those little bits of clues on what to do next. A bit like in the story where they're told you need, the 3 items, and it's a riddle. You have to work with good intent in those stories as well. I mean, often the same quest will be given to 2 different people, and the first one is of a good heart, and they're able to complete the quest, and there's some kind of treasure involved, which isn't always a piece of gold. It's more what then takes place in their lives, something that they had really needed or wished for. And then equally, if the same challenge is given to somebody that is, ignorant of the respect that needs to be given to these places and to these beings, then they'll come a cropper. And it kind of reminds me a bit of that.
There is very much they can defend themselves if they do. So, especially at Weardale, I think, are a lot less trusting of human beings. All the stories from the Eden Valley are all like, they helped us milk the cows and all that stuff, whereas Weardale, it's all like, yes, we broke your kid's legs and sold your daughter.
Yeah, like, look out, basically, and take heed. Thanks so much for listening and watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider joining us on Patreon for dozens more episodes of unreleased bonus content, monthly online events, and a private chat. We are a warm, supportive community, and it really helps to support the project. Find us on patreon.com/the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast.